Greetings to everyone. We have the opportunity today to speak to a storied a lawyer by the name of Karen Freeman Wilson. I am Sandra Sims Williams, the Chief Diversity Officer for Nielsen, and she and I have a joint conversation about women in the workplace and our journeys. So, Karen, please introduce yourself.
Sandra, what a great opportunity to be in community with you today and to join you in talking about an issue that is important to both of us. Certainly in my current role as the president and CEO of the Chicago Urban League, but also in the roles that I've had in the past as mayor, attorney general, and a member of corporate boards. I understand how important it is for us to share with other women, and particularly younger women coming up, how they might avoid some of the pitfalls that we had.
So I think with both of us, we've had some time in corporate America, and so when I got the questions, it was one of those things. Yes, we know the answers to these. So let's talk about this journey that we have experienced in terms of us, of course, being underrepresented in senior leadership. Um, what advice do you give women as they're trying to climb the corporate ladder?
You know what when I think about the efforts that women have undertaken to climb the corporate ladder, I often think about how adept we are, how well we do at really multitasking, and that's something that they will find will serve them well. So I tell them to bring their authentic selves. At the same time, I also suggest that they look for a mentor. Now, finding mentors in the corporate arena is a lot easier than, say, when I graduated from law school and found myself in a law firm during the summer. Finding a mentor then was a little harder. But now there are women who are there. There are certainly Blacks who are there. And then there are whites who are certainly willing to mentor women and others who come into firms.
Yes, and one of the things in doing looking at these questions, I have a group of young women that I mentor, like 10 of them. I've been mentoring them for the last 10 years. And one of the things I have emphasized with them is relationships. Your name has to be mentioned somewhere other than in your own circle. And if you're looking to climb the corporate ladder, people above you have to know who you are and what you're doing. And I find that we sometimes don't say enough about ourselves. I'm guilty of it. And we have often been, taught that we shouldn't. It's kind of like braggadocious.
Right.
But it's not that. And there's ways in which one can incorporate your story to others so that they recognize what you have contributed. So I think it's very important, for us all to um, pay attention to that.
I
It,
think you're absolutely right. And, you know, as parents, and I remember my mom teaching me, well, you don't need to brag about yourself. You don't need
mhm.
to talk about yourself. Someone else will talk about you. Working hard is what you need to do to really um, uh, succeed and get ahead. And there is certainly a value to humility. No one wants to hear anyone say I all the time. But to your point, it's important that our younger
Mhm.
colleagues understand that they want their name to be mentioned in the room.
Certainly, part of this journey is what we've experienced in terms of obstacles. And what are some of the obstacles you've encountered throughout your journey? And how did you manage those particular situations?
Well, when I think about the obstacles, I chuckle sometimes because being underestimated
Mhm.
is something that people could intend to be an obstacle, but I can use it as an advantage. But, I've been in a room where we're strategizing and trying to come up with the idea, and you give the idea and say, okay, I think this will help us to achieve the goal. And people sort of just pass right over that statement. And 5 minutes later, a man, more likely, and very often a white man in the room, will
Mhm.
say the same thing. And it's the best idea since sliced bread. And I'm thinking, I just said that. So the question becomes, do you say, well, I think that's a great idea. That's why I said it 5 minutes ago. Or do you say it in a way that lets people know, you are repeating what I said, or do you just let it pass and people
Mhm.
will see it? That's something that we often have to decide for ourselves. And it really depends on the circumstance.
Yeah, and that particular incident, that situation that you're talking about, has come up many, many, many times with white and black women in the room. And one of the things that we talked about, so how do we deal with that? So I've talked about if there are two women, or at least more than just yourself in the room, you need to support that woman
Yep.
by coming back and saying, Karen said this a minute ago. So how are we going to build on that? That means that you have been supported in the room,
That's right.
that has been recognized that you're supported, and then everybody else then knows, don't do that.
That's
Um,
critical. That is very critical.
oh, I'm sure. And when you think about those obstacles, one, of course, is the one where you and I both have said, I have no idea. So that's the first obstacle. And you're thinking, is anyone going to come to my rescue? You don't know, because sometimes you're the only person in the room and you have trust issues, and you're saying, okay, they're already assumed that I don't know.
Yep.
And therefore you don't lean in because you don't want to be sized up as not knowing. Because we are always assuming that everyone else does know.
And which I've learned, and you've probably learned this as well, that is not the truth. That very
Oh,
often people know less than you do, or and what I do find is that there is a way to get the information, whether
mhm,
it's from a colleague who's not in that room, or from the internet or some other source. And back in the day it was in the library.
mhm.
But there is a way to get that information. And I think that we just have to commit to doing it, because the last thing you want to do is not go into the room. I could have easily said, well, I don't know anything about being on a bank board, so maybe I shouldn't do that. But no, if the door opens, I would say, unless they're asking you to do brain surgery, walk through it. You can figure the rest of it out.
Absolutely. So, given the vast experience between the two of us, what have you seen that works in corporate America that helps support Black women in the workplace? What have you seen?
I love the employee resource groups.
Hmm.
I think that they are invaluable. And I also love when younger or new people in the office or in the corporate arena reach out to folks and say, I'd just like to take you to lunch or go to lunch with you to pick your brain. Because inevitably, that person that you're asking will say yes. They want to be helpful. And maybe they can't mentor you on a long term or formal basis, but there is so much wisdom that can be gleaned
Mhm.
in a short lunch or coffee, something that is a short term commitment and not a long term commitment, but just as valuable in many ways.
Yes. Now, one of the other things in this circle of women that I've talked to, um, they they hesitate sometimes to do what you just said about going to lunch or going to have coffee. I said, well, if people don't know you, they don't speak for you.
Right.
And so we cannot afford to hesitate to build relationships because those are the people who said, well, you know, Karen, I had coffee with her and I have this perspective. This is how she works. These are the things, the projects that she's working on. So that they actually can say, without you being in the room, about Karen. Someone can speak on your behalf. And that actually has more positive to it than people realize because decisions are made in these rooms that we are likely not a part of.
That is so, so true. And so if you get to know a person on an informal basis, another suggestion when they have the outings, whether it's the golf outing or, you
Mhm.
know, maybe it's a after work event, you don't have to you don't have to close the doors. You don't have to turn the lights out, but at least go
Yes.
and you know, get to know some folks and get to know new people every time you attend.
Hmm. And the other thing with getting to know people is that you still have to communicate with them.
Yes.
This is not a one and done thing. When we talk about building relationships, it means that there is a give and take, but there is a back and forth. You need to communicate
Oh, absolutely.
um, because people don't want to feel like they're being used either. Um, the You mentioned the employee resource groups. I have asked people as they join organizations to look into how they can be involved internally, because that's also an avenue that one can take. Um, when you earlier on when you started, did you feel at any point that you had to you felt the need to code switch and not be your authentic self?
You know, what I will tell you is that I still code switch. You know, if I'm going to be honest,
Yes.
and I'll give you an example. Uh,
Hmm.
my conversation is different at my sorority meeting than it
Yes.
is at my lyric opera board meeting. It just is.
Right.
And that's because at the sorority meeting, I know that people understand me, right?
Hmm.
And they know me better because I've been there longer. At the lyric opera board is relatively new. And so, yeah, I still do that. Did it more earlier and
Hmm.
don't do it as much now. But
Right.
every now and then you still find yourself in a new situation and
Hmm.
in a new scenario where you code switch.
Right. And I don't know if it ever goes away because I think that, as you say, depending on the situation you're in, uh, you're not going to actually have everything about you shown.
Yes.
And we have been taught for so long to be careful that that's why we tiptoe first before we make complete steps. I need to know where I am, who's in this room, and will this make a difference about how you perceive me?
Yes, that's
Yeah.
very true.
And, and that is a load. If anybody wants to know, it is definitely a load, really.
Well, the good news is we have LinkedIn.
Yes. Research is important. And
It
I
is.
thought about this when we were coming along, you couldn't look people up. You don't know.
If they weren't in the encyclopedia, you couldn't.
And should we define now what is an encyclopedia,
Right, right,
people?
right.
Okay. So in developing relationships, how many and how often have you actually had mentors or sponsors that you're aware of? The sponsors, of course, that you're aware of.
Oh goodness. I've been so blessed and fortunate to have mentors and sponsors at every step of my career. Probably one of my first was I started out prosecuting,
Hmm.
and the prosecutor actually um, suggested to the governor that we had just helped get elected. And he brought me in to a
Hmm.
fundraiser to help the governor get elected. I would have never been involved in that. And ultimately, I ended up as a department head because of that one event. And it just continued on through each step where I had someone who said, I thought of your name. I thought you might be interested in this. And because I've been so fortunate, I've tried to do that for other people at every opportunity that I've got.
That is also true of anyone who really knows about women and Black women in the workplace. They know, uh, reach back and lift, bring
Yes.
someone else to that table, because one is already lonely. So
Yeah.
I would tend to think you'd want to bring somebody along. And every time we enter a different room, we learn some lessons, and those lessons absolutely should be shared, because the next person coming along shouldn't have to fight through what we fought through.
Have you ever encountered someone who seems like they want to be the only person in the room? And when you do that, when you've seen that, what has been your response? How have you dealt with them?
Yes, and you know what? It is the weirdest thing, because you're thinking, um, you can't stay single here in this situation and in this environment. It's actually detrimental to you.
I was about to say,
And
yes,
yeah, and it's dangerous.
that's exactly.
You don't fight a war with one hand. And so I have often asked myself, you either are getting some kind of, payback behind the wall or something for you to not want anyone else to actually follow this road, or
Yes.
be a party to learning and expanding. By the way, you're expanding other people's intelligence about us if you have more of us in the room, because it's already thought that it's a monolith. It's not a monolith. Yeah. Um, I, I have I have had the opportunity one time to face the person and say something, because I didn't understand it. So the mentoring, though, that you've had, how did you create your mentoring? Because do you have a board of advisors? Do you have people in different factions of what it is that you do, or is there people who absolutely know nothing about what you do that you ask for advice?
There have been times where I have had the board of advisors, and
Hmm.
I still have it informally. People that are my go-to, that I know that I can bounce things off. There will be no judgment.
Hmm.
Increasingly, my 28-year-old daughter is becoming one of them, which is really a wonderful experience. And it goes back and forth, because certainly she comes to me for advice, but as she develops professionally, and as I always tell people that her contact list is much more extensive than mine is. And I'll
Hmm.
ask her, hey, can you put me in touch with this person? But, it, the perspective that she has is often helpful. But there are also times that I seek people out,
Hmm.
because I know they have a skill set or an experience or knowledge that I still need to acquire. And
Hmm.
we learn something every day. And the good news is, I think because I've tried to be that to others, people are always willing, even busy people. You say to folks, I know you're busy, but can I get 15 minutes of your time?
Mhm.
Uh,
Um, you talk about your 28-year-old. What kinds of things does she come to you for, uh, in terms of her corporate life, or if she's in corporate?
She is. She's actually in big law. And that was a place that I chose not to go
Hmm.
into. I spent summers, but not permanently. And I was very hesitant about her going. But ultimately, I said, no, she has to have the experience. And so I often tell her, just ask. Really, some of the same things that we've been talking about, you know,
Hmm.
develop relationships, talk to people, ask the extra question. She's one of those folks who wants to get things done very quickly. And sometimes she'll stress herself out on a deadline that she's created. And I
Hmm.
said, hey, you need to ask them, when do they need it? When is it due? And she just had that experience a couple of weeks ago where she, rushed to get something done. She got it on a Friday. She finished it the Friday, and the guy said, "Well, I really didn't expect this until next week." And I said, "See, I told you, you have to ask." Now, of course, if you are a parent of an adult child, you know that sometimes they take your advice and sometimes they don't. So she said, but she did come back and say, Mom, you were right. I should
Hmm.
have just asked the question.
Because it's gotten tougher.
Yeah.
And so I do want them to have their eyes wide open, as I know you do. And hopefully we have given them something to think about.
Well, it has been a treat to talk to you. And, I just appreciate the opportunity to share.
Good. Thank you so much. And blessings to you.
Absolutely. And back at you and your family.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye bye.